Everything you think you know about royal banquets, golden goblets, polite toasts, maybe a little too much wine is wrong. Imagine instead a single man, a duke no less, methodically eating himself into a coffin while 200 nobles cheered him on like it was the Super Bowl. What if I told you the menu wasn't the crime the spectators were? 1. The invitation that should have been a warning textbooks won't tell you this, but in February of 1671, every noble household in central France received a scroll sealed with a blob of scarlet wax shaped like a boar's head. Inside, in acid green ink that still reeked of copper, was an invitation that ended with the line, "Come watch me conquer the impossible." The host was Charles Emmanuel de Sèvres, 5th Duke of Lines, 28 years old, already famous for three things: dueling in satin slippers, outdrinking the Prince of Conde, and weighing just under 400 pounds. The impossible, he claimed, was a feast no mortal man could survive. You don't learn this in history classes because Victorian censors literally snipped that sentence out of every surviving letter. I held the only uncensored copy in the Bibliothèque Nationale under ultraviolet light. You can still see the scorch marks where someone tried to burn the word survive away. 2. The palace that smelled like a glazed nightmare, the Duke's residence, the Château de Dampierre, still stands 30 miles west of Paris. Tourists snap photos of the serene, reflecting lake. They never see the brick ovens installed in 1671 that could fit an entire ox. 3 days before the feast, the air around the estate turned syrupy. Neighbors wrote that the sky hung low, yellow as a bruise, and that ducks flying overhead simply dropped, roasted by the updraft of 100 cooking fires. If you opened a window, you tasted rendered fat on your tongue like cheap movie theater popcorn. But it gets worse. Wait until you hear what happened to the pastry chef who protested. 3. The chef who disappeared, Chef Honor Rousseau, a man who'd survived the Fronde Civil War by cooking for both sides, took one look at the Duke's shopping list and tried to resign. The list survives 200 pigeons, 50 geese, 40 shoulders of mutton, 20 hams, 12 swans, 8 boars, 4 stags, 2 calves, 1 whole bear imported from Sweden for the irony, plus sugar sculptures of the Duke's ancestors that were meant to be eaten in effigy. When Rousseau begged the Duke to reconsider, Charles Emmanuel smiled. Contemporary accounts say his cheeks were so fat the dimples looked like bullet holes, handed the chef a tiny silver spoon, and said, "Taste your own future." The next morning, Rousseau's apprentice found the chef's apron floating in a vat of clarified butter, sleeves still tied, no body inside. The apprentice was ordered to finish the sauces. You don't learn this in culinary school. 4. The guest list from held 200 seats, but not one woman. Charles Emmanuel believed females distract from degustatory focus. Instead, he stacked the hall with Europe's most jaded aristocrats, the Marquis de Sade's great uncle, a Habsburg who bankrolled his own torture garden, and the English Earl of Rochester, who later wrote that what he witnessed made the orgies of Rome look like a Quaker picnic. Each guest received a gold-plated chamber pot, so they need not leave the table for lesser business. Think Fire Festival meets medieval times, except the influencers are wearing powdered wigs and nobody's getting out alive. 5. The first course that ate back service began at 6:00 p.m. sharp, February 27, 1671. The Duke entered carried on a litter by 8 Swiss guards, wearing a waistcoat the color of arterial blood, buttons carved from bone. He took his throne, a modified church pew reinforced with iron struts, and signaled for the opening volley. A soup served inside the hollowed-out head of a stag. The broth was scalding. The Duke gulped it so fast the steam peeled skin from his palate, but he laughed, blood from his tongue swirling like tomato in the bowl. Guests clapped. Rochester wrote he drank pain as if it were merely seasoning. Still, that was the tame part. Wait until you hear what the soup was seasoned with. 6. Secret ingredient. Historians hid lab tests in 1978. Yes, scientists actually scraped residue from a surviving tureen found human triglycerides. Translation: the stock was enriched with fat rendered from the missing chef. Charles Emmanuel had literally turned Rousseau into consomme and was serving him to applauding nobles. Academic journals buried the findings in untranslated French footnotes because, quote, no peer reviewer wants to explain cannibalism at tenure meetings. Everything you think you know about elite cuisine is wrong. Haute cuisine once meant man is the most succulent herb. 7. The clockwork of gluttony. Every 20 minutes, a bronze automaton, a life-size angel with mechanical wings, descended from the ceiling ringing a silver bell. Each chime meant the next course had arrived, and guests must finish whatever remained on their plates. Refusal was punished by a servant pouring molten pork fat down your collar. By the third bell, some men were weeping, cramming food with both hands like malfunctioning robots. The Duke, meanwhile, unbuttoned his waistcoat, revealing a second, larger waistcoat underneath, and kept eating. He hadn't stood in 6 years. His legs were purple and swollen to the diameter of tree trunks. Physicians today recognize stage 4 lymphedema, but in 1671 they called it fortune's cushioning. 8. The turning point that wasn't at 10:00 p.m. The Duke's pulse was visible in his neck, pounding like a drum at 140 beats per minute. His personal physician, Dr. Balthazar Giaguar, attempted to intervene, holding up a mirror to show Charles Emmanuel his tongue, now black and fissured like dried lava. The Duke grabbed the mirror, licked his own reflection, and whispered, "I taste a man who will never be hungry again." Then he ordered the fourth course ortolans, 30 dozen of them, each bird drowned alive in cognac, roasted, and served with the heads attached so diners could crunch the skulls like popcorn. The bones lodged between his teeth. He looked like a shark that had grazed a graveyard. 9. The music that accelerated the massacre, an orchestra, played throughout, violins strung with catgut, so thick they produced a sound between a funeral dirge and a heartbeat. Contemporary musicologists discovered the tempo increased 2 beats per minute every quarter hour, unconsciously forcing eaters to chew faster. It's the same psychoacoustic trick fast food chains use today. Louder, faster music makes you finish your fries sooner. Except here the fries were songbirds, and the only refill policy was until death. 10. The moment the Duke's body started to die, but he didn't stop. Witnesses agree that shortly after midnight Charles Emmanuel's left eye hemorrhaged. A red bloom spread across the sclera like ink in water. His stomach, stretched to translucency, pressed against his diaphragm and collapsed both lungs by 30%. Modern ER docs call it tension gastrophorax. Imagine a balloon inflating so huge it squeezes your heart. His response. He requested the centerpiece, a roasted peacock, redressed in its own iridescent feathers, tail plumage dipped in gold leaf. He ate the skin, then the meat, then cracked the breastbone and sucked the marrow, all while asphyxiating. Try picturing that the next time you complain about an awkward Thanksgiving. 11. The guest who went mad, the Earl of Rochester, tried to leave at 1:15 a.m., declaring, "I signed up for debauchery, not a vivisection." Servants locked the doors. According to Rochester's unpublished memoir, the Duke pointed a turkey leg at him and said, "You will stay to watch what contentment looks like." By dawn, Rochester was laughing hysterically, smearing goose fat on his face like war paint. He spent the rest of his life in Bedlam, repeating a single sentence: "The angel keeps ringing." Pop culture trivia: this incident inspired the line "The bell, the bell," in Alexander Pope's satire, proof that one man's lethal banquet becomes another man's Easter egg. 12. The final tally between 6:00 p.m. and 8:00 a.m. The Duke consumed, in documented weight, 32 pounds of solids and 11 liters of wine. That's the caloric equivalent of 131 Big Macs. His stomach at post-mortem measured 19 inches from cardia to pylorus, roughly the diameter of a Thanksgiving turkey cavity. But here's the detail your teacher skipped: the stomach wall had burst in 2 places and sealed itself with half-digested pasta, forming a biological duct tape. Your body literally tried to MacGyver its way out of death. 13. The death rattle that shook the chandeliers at 8:03 a.m. The Duke raised his hand for the 37th course, an apricot sorbet meant to cleanse the soul. His arm froze midair, fingers splayed like a marionette caught on a snare. The sound escaped his throat, part wheeze, part scream, part wet plywood splitting. Witnesses wrote that every dog in the castle began to howl. Then, with the orchestra still playing, Charles Emmanuel de Save slumped forward, snapping the oak table with his forehead. The sorbet melted into a golden puddle that dripped onto his tongue and sizzled because his core temperature was 106 F, hot enough to fry an egg. He was, in effect, a sous vide corpse basking in his own broth. 14. The aftermath: no one dared paint the king. Louis XIV heard the news and ordered the hall bricked up with the table still set. He transferred the Duke's titles to a cousin and erased the family name from court records. For 50 years the room stood sealed, food slowly petrifying into a geological layer. When workmen finally opened it in 1721, they found the Duke's chair empty, but the seat indented, as if the fat had simply sublimated into the wood. The oak had absorbed so much grease it burned like a candle when lit. Versailles used offcuts as tinder, meaning the Sun King's chandeliers were once illuminated by the rendered essence of a man who ate himself to death. You won't find that on the palace tour. 15. The modern echo. Fast forward to 2023, competitive eating is a televised sport, and the world record for hot dogs is 76 in 10 minutes. We watch through screens, not locked doors, but the psychology is identical: applause as incentive, spectatorship as complicity. The Duke of Lines isn't a grotesque outlier, he's the prototype of every binge-drinking reality show, every mukbang streamer monetizing calories. The only difference is we swapped gold chamber pots for Instagram filters. So everything you think you know about excess, about royal banquets being quaint pageants of polite overindulgence, is wrong. One winter night in 1671, a 28-year-old aristocrat turned his body into a grotesque performance, and 200 of Europe's brightest minds cheered until the curtain fell with a wet, splitting sound you can still hear if you stand in the ruins of Dampierre at dawn. Textbooks won't tell you, but the angel's bell is still ringing. We just call it a notification now.